I never thought I'd be the guy to suspect his wife of cheating. Susan and I had been together for 6 years, and honestly I thought we had a good thing going. She could be a bitch sometimes. She had this knack for acting like she was the queen of everything, always throwing fits when she didn't get her way, but I figured that was just her personality. She was manipulative, sure, but I never thought she'd actually cheat on me. Not until the signs started piling up, that is. It all began a few months ago when she started acting weird about her phone. She'd hide it more, sometimes sneaking off into another room when I was sitting right there. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just being secretive or had some work stuff. But then she started canceling plans last minute, claiming she had urgent meetings, and her stories didn't add up. She'd brush me off when I asked about her whereabouts or who she was texting late at night. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then I noticed her behavior at home changing. She was more impatient, snapping at me over nothing, and suddenly she was obsessed with her appearance, more than usual if that's possible. I'd come home from work, and she'd be in the mirror for ages, trying to look perfect more than just for herself, I think. The worst part, she started lying about small things like where she'd been or who she'd been with. I'd catch her in little contradictions, and that nagging feeling kept gnawing at me. One night she stayed out later than usual. I tried calling her several times, but she didn't pick up. When she finally came back around 2 a.m., she was drunk, stumbling and furious when I asked where she'd been. She told me she'd been at some girl's night out, but I knew her friends. She doesn't have many, and I didn't hear about any plans that night. The next morning, I decided to check her phone. That's when I found the first real clue, the messages. Nothing explicit at first, just flirty texts exchanged with some guy named Mike. The way she was talking to him, it was obvious they knew each other well, maybe more than friends. I felt my stomach drop. My heart started pounding. I was furious, confused, betrayed all at once. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the language in those texts was suggestive, and she was clearly hiding something from me. At that moment, I knew I had to find out the truth. I had this gut feeling she was lying and hiding something bigger. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the evidence staring right at me. I felt sick, like I'd been punched in the gut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head, her sneaking around, those texts, her changing attitude. It was like some twisted game she'd been playing on me. The betrayal hit hard, but what cut even deeper was knowing I'd trusted her, and she'd been lying all along. I didn't want to accuse her outright without more evidence, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a fling or some one-night stand. I had a sneaking suspicion she was involved with someone else, perhaps even physically. And then, out of nowhere, I remembered something I'd overheard during a random conversation at work a few days earlier. Susan had been talking about some federally approved validation system they were testing, something about simulating real-world interactions and verifying actual existence. I didn't understand the full detail at the time, but a part of me remembered her mentioning a reality authentication officer who would verify whether a person was truly real or just some digital construct. I dismissed it as some tech jargon, but suddenly, the pieces clicked. I remembered seeing her slip her phone into her purse that day, late in the afternoon, right before I got home. I'd seen her go into the bedroom and I'd peeked inside. She was fiddling with her virtual reality gear, something she'd been obsessed with lately. Every now and then she'd talk about simulation immersion training and how she was part of a new project. But I didn't think much of it back then. Now I wondered if she'd been lying to me about her work all along, or worse, if she'd been hiding her affair in this weird digital phase she'd been caught up in. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she might have been cheating in ways I'd never imagined, through some virtual interaction that she claimed was training. But in reality, she was sneaking around with some guy during these so-called immersion sessions. It was crazy, I know. It sounds like a sci-fi plot, but I swear I saw physical logs that proved unauthorized material interaction during her virtual tests. It was as if she was cheating in her digital world and I was just too blind to see it. It confirmed my worst suspicions. She was lying, she was cheating, and she was doing it right under my nose, using her work as an excuse. That night, I felt like my entire world was crashing down. I didn't sleep a wink, haunted by images of her with this Mike, or whoever it was in her digital world while I was left in the cold, real one. I was furious, betrayed, crushed. I never thought I'd reach a point where I'd question everything, my marriage, her loyalty, my own sanity. But here we are. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a train. My head was pounding, and I couldn't get the image of her with that digital lover out of my mind. I kept replaying everything I had uncovered, the texts, the logs, the suspicious behavior, and I knew I couldn't just brush this off. I had to confront her. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I made a plan. I waited until she left for what she called a mandatory meeting with her project team, which, knowing her, was probably code for her meeting Mike somewhere. I stayed home, heart pounding, trying to decide how to approach this. I knew she'd lie, she always did. But I also knew I had enough evidence to shake her up, maybe even break her. I couldn't believe I was about to do this, but I was ready to face whatever she threw my way. When she finally came back around noon, she looked smug, confident, like she thought she was getting away with everything. I was in the living room pretending to be chill, but inside I was boiling. As she walked in, she immediately started with her usual bitchy attitude, throwing out sarcastic comments about how I must be so paranoid and nothing's going on, I swear. I looked her right in the eyes and said, "We need to talk, now." She scoffed, rolling her eyes as she sat down on the couch. "What is it? Got some kind of crazy suspicion again? You and your paranoia, I don't have time for your accusations." That's when I pulled out her phone and showed her the messages. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. "Explain this," I said, voice trembling with rage. "Who is Mike? And what the hell have you been doing during your training sessions? Because I know you've been sneaking around. I saw the logs, Susan. I know you've been cheating on me, not just in the real world, but in your little digital universe too." Her face turned red. She looked like she was about to deny everything, but the evidence was staring her in the face. Instead, she threw up her hands and yelled, "Oh, that's nothing. You're reading too much into it. It's just some stupid work thing. You're overreacting like always. You're so insecure, it's pathetic." But I wasn't buying it, not anymore. I knew she was lying, and I was furious. "You think I don't know what's really going on?" I shot back. "You've been hiding this affair behind that virtual training, haven't you? You've been cheating on me with some guy named Mike during those so-called simulation immersion sessions. I don't care how you spin it, you've been lying from the start, and I have the logs to prove it." She looked at me with that bitchy sneer, trying to act like she was the victim. "You're so dramatic. You don't understand how complicated this is. You're just jealous because I'm successful in my career and I have a life outside of this stupid marriage." Her words hit me like a slap. She was trying to turn it around, make me the crazy one, but I wasn't falling for it. I just stared at her, blood boiling, sick to my stomach. The confrontation didn't go quite how I expected. She kept lying, denying everything, even when I told her I had the physical logs showing unauthorized material interaction, proof that she'd been cheating during her virtual tests. She shrugged it off, claiming it was a glitch or some technical error, but I knew better. I knew she was lying because I'd seen her behavior firsthand, how she'd sneaked out, how she'd been secretive about her work. I could see it, plain and simple. The worst part, though, wasn't just the betrayal. It was watching her lie so effortlessly, like she didn't care how much she was hurting me. That bitchy tone, that sarcastic smirk, it was like she enjoyed twisting the knife. It made me realize how little she thought of me, of us. She was so detached from reality that she thought she could just lie her way out of this mess. I felt my world unraveling, feeling more alone than I ever had before. Part of me wanted to scream, to rage at her for the pain she was causing, for the trust she was destroying. But another part, the part I didn't want to admit, was starting to feel numb. I'd always believed in honesty, in loyalty, but now I saw how fragile all of that really was. She was a master manipulator, and I was just a fool for trusting her. The betrayal ran so deep, I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to look at her the same way again. As she sat there, acting like she hadn't just been caught in a lie, I realized I had to decide what comes next. Do I keep fighting for this marriage? Do I forgive and forget? Or do I walk away and try to rebuild my shattered trust? I knew one thing: I couldn't stay passive anymore. The damage was done, and I had to face the truth. She had been cheating in every sense of the word, and I was left picking up the pieces of what was supposed to be our life together. After she left the room, I sat there for a long time, just staring at her phone and the messages that had turned my world upside down. My mind was racing, trying to process everything I had just uncovered and what it all meant. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and deep sadness. The person I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been lying to my face and cheating on me behind my back, not only physically but in some twisted digital fantasy world she'd been hiding from me. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so naive. I kept thinking about the logs I found, how her virtual environment was supposed to be all about simulation immersion training, but instead it turned into some kind of secret affair zone. I had seen the physical verification logs, the ones that tracked real-time activity, interactions, unauthorized material exchanges, evidence that she'd been engaging in more than just pretend scenarios. It was as if her work had become a cover story for her cheating. She'd always been bitchy, manipulative, and full of lies, but I never imagined she'd take it this far. And I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I knew I couldn't just let her get away with it. I had to decide what to do next. I realized that confronting her again might not be enough. She could just lie her way out, spin some new story, and I'd be back at square one. I needed a plan, something that would give me real proof, something that would make her realize I wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had to get to the truth, all of it, no matter how painful it might be. In the following days, I started digging deeper. I had to be sure. I contacted a friend who was into cybersecurity and data logs. I told him I had suspicions about my wife, and he agreed to help me analyze the virtual environment logs she'd left behind. He was a bit surprised when I mentioned reality authentication systems and unauthorized material exchange, but he didn't ask too many questions. He just said he'd look into it, see if there was any way her work system could have been manipulated or faked. I knew that her job involved these high-tech simulations, but I also knew she was skilled at hiding her tracks, just like she was with everything else. While waiting for my friend's analysis, I decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine at home. The last thing I wanted was a confrontation, but I knew I had to face her again. I decided to catch her off guard. I planned to ask her about her work, about the virtual environment, and see how she would react. I wanted her to slip up or give me some reason to believe she was innocent. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was probably counting on me not digging deeper, that her lies would hold up. The day came when I finally sat her down. I told her I'd been talking with some folks about her work and that I was trying to understand this new simulation immersion training she was so obsessed with. She scoffed and rolled her eyes, pretending to be annoyed, but I saw the flicker of nervousness in her eyes. I pressed her further, asking about her virtual sessions, about the logs I'd seen, and about her interactions with Mike. I wanted her to think I was buying her story, but I also wanted her to slip. She tried to brush me off, acting like I was crazy. "You're obsessing over nothing, as usual," she spat. "That's just some stupid game and you're making a big deal out of it. I don't have time for your paranoia. I'm not cheating. Maybe you're just jealous because I'm smarter than you and I'm doing something important." Her tone was bitchy and dismissive, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. She knew I was onto her, and she was trying to cover her tracks. I pressed her again, asking about the physical logs. I told her I knew her virtual environment had been compromised. Her face twitched, and for a moment I thought she might crack. Instead, she looked away and said, "You don't understand how complicated this is. It's all just a big misunderstanding." But her voice was shaky. I knew she was lying, and I also knew she was starting to get panicked. That was the moment I realized I had an opening. I had enough proof now, not just from the logs but from her own reactions, to expose her completely. I kept pushing. I told her I was done being played, done being lied to. I told her I'd seen enough, and that's when she finally snapped. Her bitchy veneer cracked and she yelled at me, calling me stupid, paranoid, and crazy. She accused me of spying on her, of being insecure, and she even had the audacity to say I was the one cheating because I was suspicious of her. That made my blood boil. I realized she was trying to deflect, to turn everything around on me, to make me the bad guy, the jealous loser. But I wasn't falling for that anymore. The truth was, I'd been betrayed in a way I never could have imagined. She'd been hiding her affair, maybe even her virtual cheating, behind her work and her bitchy attitude. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare where everything I believed in was just a lie. I wanted to believe she'd come clean, that she'd admit she'd made a mistake, but I knew better. She was a liar and she was good at it. The real question was, how much more was she hiding? How deep did her deception go? I realized I'd reached a tipping point. I had the evidence, I had my suspicions, and I had the emotional turmoil. I knew I couldn't just keep pretending I was okay with it. I had to make a decision, whether to fight for this or walk away. Honestly, part of me was already prepared to leave. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair, and I didn't see how we could go back from this. But I also knew that I needed to find a way to get out with my dignity intact. And that's where I was standing, staring at her while she yelled at me, her bitchy mask slipping away, revealing the cold, manipulative woman underneath. The days that followed were a blur of emotion and planning. I couldn't sleep much, my mind kept circling back to everything I'd uncovered. The logs, her lies, her attitude, her manipulative way of dismissing everything I brought up. I knew I had to act decisively, but I also needed to be smart about it. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about protecting myself and figuring out what I really wanted out of this mess. I spent hours going through her virtual environment logs, trying to piece together what exactly she'd been doing during her simulation training sessions. The technical details were complicated, but my friend helped decode them. It turned out her digital interactions had been recorded in a separate, hidden server, one she thought she'd hidden well. But with a little digging, my friend found evidence of unauthorized material exchanges, secret files, and even chat logs with Mike, confirming she'd been more than just flirting. She'd been actively engaging in some kind of digital affair, all while pretending to be busy with her job. The logs proved she'd lied her ass off, and I felt a twisted mixture of relief and disgust. Meanwhile, I'd already decided I couldn't stay in this marriage. I'd wasted enough time trusting her, believing she was just having a midlife crisis or whatever she'd told me. But now I saw the truth. She was a liar, a cheater, and a manipulator who'd been hiding her infidelity behind a mask of bitchiness and lies. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I had to be prepared. I needed to know exactly how much she'd lied and what her next move might be. That day, I set up a camera in the living room. Nothing obvious, just a small device I could monitor from my phone. My plan was to catch her in the act if she tried to lie her way out again or if she tried to run. I also scheduled a meeting with a divorce lawyer. I knew I wasn't going to stay married to someone I couldn't trust anymore. The betrayal cut too deep, and I'd come to the conclusion that love alone wasn't enough to fix this kind of damage. The moment came when I finally called her to confront her again, this time with everything laid out in front of her. I told her I knew about her digital affair, about the logs, about her secret chats. I told her I had proof she'd been cheating not just physically but in her virtual world. I could see her face tight, her bitchy smirk was replaced by a flicker of panic. She tried to deny it, of course. "That's impossible," she snapped. "You're just paranoid, you're imagining things, I love you and I'd never do that." I shot back, "No, Susan. You've been lying this whole time. I've seen the logs and I know you've been sneaking around during your virtual sessions, messing around with Mike or whoever. You've been lying about everything. I trusted you, and now I see you for what you really are, a manipulative little bitch who's been using her work as an excuse for her cheating." She stared at me, mouth open, trying to come up with some bullshit excuse, but I was done wasting breath. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I wanted her out of my life. Her face twisted into a sneer and she started crying, but I saw right through her tears. They were fake, just like her lies. The bitchiness, the manipulative attitude, it all reeked of guilt and desperation. She knew she'd been caught and she didn't like it. That night she left the house, shrieking about how I was ruining her career and that I was overreacting. But I didn't care. I was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster, but I felt a strange sense of relief too. I was finally freeing myself from her lies and betrayal, even if it hurt like hell. I knew I had to start over, rebuild my trust in myself, and move forward. Looking back, I realized that I was blind for a long time. I always believed that honesty was the foundation of a relationship. But now I see how fragile that trust can be, how easy it is for someone to manipulate and deceive you. My biggest lesson: never ignore the signs, no matter how insignificant they seem. And never ever stay with someone who lies to your face and betrays you in ways you never imagined. I thought I knew my wife, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. Now I'm working on picking up the pieces. I've started therapy, and I'm trying to rebuild my sense of self. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't let anyone manipulate me again. And I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar learns to listen to their gut. Trust is everything, and once it's broken, it's damn hard to fix. After she moved out, everything felt like a big, painful blur. My house, once filled with her bitchy comments and manipulative smirks, suddenly seemed empty and cold. I threw myself into packing up her things, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I needed to clear my head. Every corner reminded me of her lies, her cheating. I kept replaying everything I had uncovered, the logs, her reactions, her fake tears, and I wondered how I'd ever trusted her in the first place. The hardest part was dealing with the aftermath emotionally. I felt betrayed at every level, by her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. But I also felt stupid, naive even, for not seeing it sooner. How could I have missed all the signs? How could I have been so blind? I'd always prided myself on being rational, cautious, not easily fooled. And yet, she had managed to hide her affair in a digital realm I didn't understand, using her work as a cover. It was a bitter pill to swallow. I realized that part of what made it so painful was the fact that she'd always been bitchy and manipulative, but I'd chalked that up to her personality. Now I saw it for what it was, a way to control and deceive. She lied to my face, made me doubt myself, and played the victim while she was out sneaking around with some guy during her virtual sessions. The betrayal was deeper than I thought possible, and I couldn't help but question everything about our marriage, about her, about myself. I started seeing a counselor, not just to process the heartbreak, but to understand how I'd let myself get into this situation. It was humbling, admitting I'd been blind, but also necessary. I needed to rebuild my confidence, my trust in my own instincts. I also had to face the reality that I was probably better off without her manipulative presence in my life. I had to move on, even if part of me still felt the sting of loss. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work and some new hobbies, things that kept my mind busy. I was angry, yes, but I also felt a strange sense of liberation. I realized how much I'd been giving her control over my feelings, my trust, my happiness. Now that it was gone, I was starting to see things more clearly. I didn't want to be involved with someone who lied to me, who hid her infidelity behind a fake smile and a bitchy attitude. I deserved better, much better. One thing I kept thinking about was how I could have prevented this. I was so focused on the idea of trust and loyalty that I overlooked the signs of her manipulation. Her changing attitude, her secretive behavior, her lies about her work. Those were all red flags I ignored. I'd always believed that if I was cautious enough, I could avoid heartbreak. But now I see that no matter how careful you are, some people are just good at hiding their true selves. That realization hurt, but it also made me more cautious about who I trust in the future. I also learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is cut your losses and walk away. Staying would have just meant prolonging the pain, giving her more power to manipulate and deceive. I had to accept that I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible and that I deserved a fresh start. I've started dating again cautiously, and I'm trying to rebuild my confidence. It's not easy, and I still have moments where I feel angry and hurt, but I'm moving forward. Looking back, I wish I could tell my past self to trust my instincts more and not ignore the subtle signs. I wish I'd seen how manipulative she was sooner. But more than anything, I want others to learn from my experience. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't let yourself be fooled by someone's bitchy attitude or manipulative lies. Trust has to be earned every step of the way, and once it's broken, it's incredibly hard to fix. But you can move on. You can rebuild your life and you can find happiness again, even if it takes time. Just never ignore your gut feeling. That's what saved me in the end. Now I spend a lot of time reflecting on everything that happened. The betrayal, the lies, the way she manipulated her way into my life, only to tear it apart with her digital affair. It's been a brutal lesson in trust, deception, and how easily things can fall apart when someone hides their true nature behind a bitchy facade and a web of lies. I used to think that my marriage was unbreakable, that love could fix everything. Turns out, some people just don't deserve your trust, especially when they're willing to throw everything away for some digital thrill or a fleeting affair. I've come out of this with a clearer understanding of what I need from a partner and what I absolutely won't tolerate. No matter how charming or manipulative someone might seem, if they lie and betray and manipulate like she did, they don't deserve a second chance. I've learned that loyalty isn't about grand gestures. It's about the small things, the honesty in everyday life, and the respect you give each other. Once that's gone, everything crumbles. Most importantly, I've realized the importance of listening to that little voice inside. You know, your gut. I ignored a lot of warning signs because I wanted to believe in the best in her. But ignoring those signs only made everything worse. I wish I'd seen her true nature sooner, but I also accept that I can't change the past. All I can do now is use this pain to grow stronger, wiser, more cautious. Moving forward, I'm not rushing into anything new. I've learned to take my time, to really get to know someone and to trust my instincts. I want a relationship built on honesty, respect, and genuine connection, qualities I now know she never truly had. That bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, they're part of what made her who she is. But I refuse to be the fool anymore. Looking back at this whole experience, I realize how much I've grown. I've faced the brutal truth about someone I cared deeply for, and I've come out the other side. It wasn't easy, and I've shed some tears, but I've also gained clarity. I won't let anyone manipulate me again. I'll be smarter, more cautious, more aware of the signs of deception. I'll value myself more and trust my own judgment. So if there's anything I want to leave others with, it's this. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't let someone's bitchy attitude or manipulative behavior fool you into thinking they're worth holding onto. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's not easy to repair. But you can survive, you can rebuild, and you can find happiness again. Just remember, no matter how much you love someone, your own well-being and integrity come first. Protect yourself, listen to your instincts, and never be afraid to walk away from what's toxic. That's what this experience has taught me, and I hope it helps someone else out there too.